J.K. Dobbins. I wasn't a big fan, as everybody knows, and as you know. Not a big fan in the sense that, yeah, he's good, but, so are 19 other guys, right?
Yep.
Boy, did he capture my heart and mind, didn't he, as the year went on.
2,003 yards.
The ability to make people miss, his toughness, getting the extra yards, never getting knocked backwards, breaking tackles, never getting caught from behind, except...
You told me to let it go. Now you're bringing it up.
I know. I think he's got similarities to Christian McCaffrey as far as running the football. I think that's a really good comparison.
Doesn't feel
where
like he has that
doesn't.
burst.
I think he does. Where he doesn't have Christian McCaffrey's skill. Christian McCaffrey, and maybe his father Ed, who was an NFL wide receiver, taught him this, is a little bit more skilled when they line up that running back to create a mismatch in the slot as far as running routes. But I think J.K. is a guy that is going to have a nice career and a nice future in the NFL. I don't know if he'll be a guy that's a 1A, a 25-touch guy a game, but he's a guy that's going to be a very valuable player on somebody's football team. And great career and a great year at Ohio State. It was so fun to watch this kid, how much more he improved from last year to this year. It was really one of the cool stories that some people talked about, but there was other big stories that overshadowed the improvement from 18 to 19.
Yeah, when you got down to the end of the year against Wisconsin, Penn State, and in the playoff game, it's hard to argue with the production. And the Michigan game from J.K. Dobbins. Yeah, 4 touchdowns or 5 against Michigan, something like that. As many as he wanted is the answer.
Yeah, it was just fun to watch. And that's the biggest question, as we talked about, is spring ball is coming up upon us rapidly, that I want to see who emerges as running back. Master Teague, of course. But I think there's got to be somebody else, to be honest with you. I really do. There's got to be somebody with a little more explosiveness.
We'll save this topic for another day, but that reminds me of a question that I have. We're on the cusp of this era in college football where we're going to have name and likeness compensation, and we're going to have one free transfer where you can go and be immediately eligible.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Spielman. Yes. So here's my
You're welcome,
question.
everybody, all you future athletes.
So here's Ohio State, where they're clearly a national championship contender. They're okay at running back. They're not, at this point, we don't think they're elite. So in the future, we're going to get into this sometime when we have a dead day here, is what's a guy like Chuba Hubbard from Oklahoma State worth to Ohio State as a transfer next season?
Amazing.
In the name and likeness era.
Free agency. Go get it.
I mean, that's going to be really... Or a corner who's like, oh, they lost Jeff Okudah, but they got Shaun Wade, but they could use another corner. Oh, okay, I'm playing at Missouri, but I'm a really good corner, and I bet those folks in Columbus, those car dealers would love to have me come and endorse. So we'll get into that.
I love it. Okay. I want to go to DBU.
Yeah, DBU. Now it's going to be DEU with Bosa, and Chase Young.
Yeah. Sounds like a long firm.
Yes, it does. All right. What about J.K. Dobbins, first running back off the board? DeAndre Swift, Georgia. Jonathan Taylor, Wisconsin. And then your guy, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, LSU. 55 catches for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the bowling ball.
I love that kid, man.
It's hard not to love him. First running back off the board.
I believe Swift is the number 1 ranked, at least.
It's real tight. He's a guy who's only had 3 drops in his college career. He's likened to LaShawn McCoy. Nobody doubts his speed. He averaged 6.5 yards per carry, but J.K. had a big yards per carry average. And Jonathan Taylor's a sprinter. Hasn't caught it a lot, but he caught it more. He had 26 catches.
A lot of those were probably 20 of those were on screen passes. I like all those guys. I don't think one doesn't pop out to me. I think J.K. Dobbins and the production that he was able to give certainly has a chance to be the first running back off the board. I really like that kid from LSU. But again, that's my taste in running backs, what he is. That type of player. He's hard to see. He's got great balance. He catches the ball out of the backfield. Rarely does the first man get him down. So that's just what I like. But I can see any of those guys going number one, to be honest with you. I don't have one of those guys' favorite. It's all going to be depending on taste of what the coach or the offensive philosophy of whatever team takes those guys.
My guess would be once one of them goes, the other three will go relatively quickly. Although running backs,
I don't think so.
Really?
Yeah, that just
But I mean,
finish your sentence, because
a lot of
that's
times
why.
you have a run on. People are waiting. They're waiting. Okay, there's a couple wide receivers here who are pretty similar. We had that a few years ago with Josh Doxson and Corey Coleman, and I think Laquan Treadwell. And everybody's like, who's better? I don't know who's better.
Yeah, and all those guys are
And
pretty much out of the league.
None of them
Although
were
Josh
any good.
Doxson is the only guy that's still playing, just signed with somebody. He was with the Vikings. The Vikings ended up releasing him. I just read on ProFootballTalk.com that he just signed with somebody else. But all those guys are
Coleman,
busts.
Treadwell, they're all busts.
They're busts.
I don't think these guys will be busts.
The receivers are strong
Dobson,
group.
Yeah, the receiver. Oh my goodness! What Henry Ruggs yesterday ran 4.27.
Yeah.
Austin Mack ran well, slightly faster, because a hundredth of a second faster than KJ Hill. And
KJ didn't run very well.
Ohio State, they'll run faster on March 25th in Columbus.
Yeah.
And they'll all be, in my opinion, productive players.
Yeah.
In the NFL.
I'm not saying that. I think KJ will be a great player. That's not his strength straight away, speed. KJ's good route runner, shaky, more quick than fast type guy. But a 4.67 and a 4.6 flat, that's slow for a wide receiver. But to go back to your point about running backs,
usually just guys go, once one guy goes, people are like, oh, I do want a running back, but okay, that guy went off the board. Maybe now we ought to jump and get him.
I think running backs are the shelf life, right? Do I want to spend a first round unless they're a unique talent like Zeke Elliott or somebody like that? I don't think you'll see. I'd be surprised if any of those guys go in the first round.
I would be too.
To be honest with you.
Maybe at the end of the round, I don't know. I mean, somebody could love it. It only takes one. It's like getting married. You only got one woman to fall in love with.
The benefit of taking a running back in the first round is you're getting him at his peak years, and you get him for 5 years under the current CBA.
Correct. But I've said before, I'd never give a running back a second contract. And, boy, the Cowboys are going to really regret that Zeke contract. Yeah. If they're not already. Just like the Rams do the Gurley contract. No, I don't blame him either.
Good for him.
They fell for it. He
called their bluff and got paid. Good for him.
Speaking of the NFL and getting paid, Ryan Day's contract, I obtained a copy of it yesterday.
Wow. Investigative journalism.
And no, they sent it out to everybody. I did obtain it. I opened my email, and there it was.
Okay, well, all right. You investigated your email, and you got the contract.
I'm trying not to be, puff myself up.
You got enough people tearing you down.
That's okay. So that's fine. I deserve it. So keeps me humble, or at least keeps me moving toward being humble.
Let's not
a journey.
Let's not pat ourselves on the back too much here.
Cross country or around the world. The buyout increases. Okay, so people say, "Oh, the buyout increase. Good, he's locked up." Not so fast, my friends. His buyout was $2 million. Now his buyout is $3.5 million, and it goes down $500,000 a year. Dabo Swinney's buyout at Clemson in the first year of his new contract is $50 million.
Yeah.
So no NFL team, I don't think an NFL team, although billionaire could do it, is going to pay $50 billion to get Dabo out of his contract. Ryan Day's buyout will not keep anyone from coming to get him if he wants to be gotten.
I don't think there's one team that would ever be interested in Dabo Swinney as a NFL head coach.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think we see what Dabo is. Dabo's arguably one of the best college coaches in the history because he's making his way up that way, right?
Yep.
But I don't see any NFL team. He's a guy that's built for college.
Built for it.
Ryan Day's a guy that's built for the NFL. I don't care what anybody says. That's what he is.
Yep.
He's one of those rare guys that can do either or. You look at Ryan Day, and I see NFL on Ryan Day. I cannot not see it. I don't want to lie to you. That's the truth.
I think it's good of Ohio State and good of Ryan not to phony up some dumb buyout. Because, look, if a guy wants to coach somewhere else, you have to let him.
Yeah.
And it would not serve Ohio State's purposes to put a $25 million buyout in there, nor would it serve Ryan's purposes to, say no buyout. He is on the hook additionally for whatever amount of assistant coaches contracts they'd have to pay. For instance, let's say he's got a couple coordinators who are signed to 2-year deals, and he leaves and goes to the NFL. If those guys couldn't get another job, which if you're at Ohio State, you can, but if those guys decide not to work and Ohio State would owe them each $4 million, that would be added to Ryan's buyout. But those guys have to try to get jobs. They can't just sit there and say, I'll take my money and not do anything. So there is some mitigating damages. Essentially, he'll owe 3.5 if he leaves after this coming season, then 3, then 2.5, then 2, on down. But they're going to renegotiate his deal. It's through 2026. They'll renegotiate that thing 3 times before it gets to 2026 if he keeps winning like he is.
Yeah. He probably can afford 1 3-loss season.
He can afford more than 1. You think they'd can him if he had back-to-back 3-loss seasons?
I think they would. There'd be a lot of talk. There'd be a
lot.
Think about it now.
They'd be nervous, but I don't think they'd can him.
Think about what the expectations are here now, thanks to
Urban Frank Meyer.
Seriously.
Yeah.
I mean,
like if Justin Fields got hurt this year,
that.
And then they lost 3 games, and then next year you got a freshman sophomore quarterback, and they lose 3 games.
Got to prepare for that.
You can't keep guys here if they would transfer to LSU.
Okay, what about Alabama in the national championship putting their freshman quarterback in?
That's true. By the way,
the standard has changed, my friend. The standard has changed. Earl Bruce was 9-3, 9-3, right?
Old 9-3 Earl was the rap.
Yeah.
But he stayed for a long time.
Exactly. So it's this different standard.
This seems like a good time to read our freshest review. It comes from Kent. It's a long one. It's the longest review ever. Congratulations, Kent. You posted the longest review in the history of the Spielman and Hooley podcast. He says, I listen to multiple Buckeye podcasts, mostly while driving, and Spielman and Hooley podcast is one of my mandatory listens each week, not just for OSU football, but he talks about the other things that we do. And he says the Browns and Bengals are weirdly entertaining off the field, but not on. That's true. He says the football discussions are the primary reason. I generally laugh hearing Hooley's frustrations, which are mostly targeted at the latest Browns faux pas. He says I listen intently when Spiels gives any OSU take, and it's unique to many of the podcasts that I follow. Now, here's the memory, why I brought it up now with your reference to Earl. He says, following the 1987 football season, that was Spiels' final year, I was at the OSU Cleveland Alumni Dinner where several OSU senior players were honored, and typically the OSU head coach would be the keynote speaker. But Earl had been fired and was gone. The replacement speaker was former OSU quarterback Rex Kern, and I felt his speech was so demeaning, not just of Coach Bruce, but specifically aimed at the players on that team. Tom Tupa and Chris were both honored at the dinner, and Chris spoke. And when he did, I believe Chris stared at and directed his comments at Kern. I personally thought Chris would have loved to have sacked Rex Kern if he could. I laughingly wonder now if Chris's faith restrained him and saved Rex Kern. You remember this?
I actually remember the dinner. I don't remember the comments, probably because I was as disappointed as anybody. I felt at 6-4-1, I didn't do my job to hold up Ohio State football standards. Nobody did. I mean, we didn't do our job. And the only saving grace from my senior year was that fact that we beat Michigan up in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's it. Because other than that, I failed and we failed as a senior class. Now, there were circumstances, but the circumstances don't matter because nobody cares.
He mentions the circumstances. He says the 87 season had its challenges from Chris Carter's agent hiring to Ed Jennings mishandling the Bruce firing.
Doesn't
so the
matter.
Chris Carter thing killed you.
Well, you're taking maybe the best
wide
receiver
football
in
Hall of Famer.
In a hit. Regardless, it doesn't matter. We should have been better, and we weren't. We lost games we shouldn't have lost, and just not up to the standard that we were capable of playing. And I am responsible for that, and I'll forever take that to my grave. And I talked about on this podcast, and you actually put it up on Twitter or on Instagram, whichever thing you do, where I talked about I do wake up in the middle of the night and Instagram, Nick. Instagram
Sorry.
is what we do.
Sounded a lot like Coach Saban there.
And so I don't remember what Rex said, but he probably was telling the truth.
Well, yeah, I don't know either.
I don't know. That's
But
a long time
that guy
ago.
remembers it.
Well,
Kent
good for him.
remembers it.
Thank you for
the review, Kent.
and thank you for listening.
Absolutely right. Okay, prediction on Tom Brady's landing spot. Jeff Darlington of ESPN says he'll be stunned, shocked, something like that, if Brady's back in New England.
I think he's back in New England.
Okay, just wondered.
What do you think he's going to do?
I have no idea. I think
People are saying
I hope he's back in New England because it would just feel weird and sad to me to see him in a Colts uniform or a Charger uniform or a
the
Texans.
Giants were in play, which I can't believe
Oh,
the
come
Giants
on.
are in play because you don't want to retard the growth of Daniel Jones. I mean that's just ridiculous.
No, that wouldn't make any sense at all.
No,
What about in a Browns uniform?
no.
That would be really sad.
Somebody
That
was
would be
talking,
super sad.
I was talking to a football guy last night about Baker Mayfield,
Oh boy.
and that Baker's committed himself and seems to be
Good.
listening to
Good.
getting in shape and being much better and focused and all that stuff. Did you hear that?
Excellent. I have not heard that, but kudos to him.
Okay.
If so, I'd
Yeah.
love to see that.
Well, sure. It's only going to help everybody.
Help everybody. Everybody.
So let's get to.
Well, emails. Got lots of them.
Okay. Well, but I
got-
do want to get to your Twitter, which
Yeah,
you
we'll
you
get to the Twitter.
teased. All right.
We'll
Well,
get to the Twitter.
I'd like to be out of here by noon.
Okay.
but
Well, you tell me. We can save some of the emails.
No. Whatever's easiest for you, of course. It's
Here's
always
Matt.
is.
He says, please listen to Wednesday's podcast again, specifically what he says. This is directed to me. He says, Bruce, please listen to Wednesday's podcast again, specifically to what Spiel says about evolving. It's the growth most people experience in life. In these days of having an absolute embarrassment as the president, it's refreshing to hear thoughtful sentiments from someone who I admire as a player but admire more as a man. As for Bruce, he's growing on me because I'm trying hard not to be judgmental with some of his inane comments, but he seems to have good leadership qualities with his future endeavors. All the best, Matt. Thank you. So that brings us to the Twitter conversation.
Okay.
The other day, Dan challenged me on Twitter to be more tempered and kind and thoughtful rather than snarky and insulting.
You're very quick-witted and very good at being snarky when you want to be.
I was decent on the Grossy Mayfield topic since then. I have probably failed on the Turgeon
Not really.
stuff. Not really? Okay.
No, on the Turgeon on Twitter, you mean?
Yeah,
Or on
yeah,
on
yeah,
the
yeah,
pod-
yeah. No,
on the
Twitter.
podcast, I think we're completely legitimate on the Turgeon stuff.
Okay. All right.
All right, go ahead.
All right. Dan actually wrote back. He said, thanks for everything with the show and the impact you're both having, not just on me, but on everyone you're touching through your faith. There you go. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that. Here's Tim. He says, I agree with you. That's about ESPN Cleveland, which I don't want to talk about anymore because we've run that into the ground, and that one's for my business endeavor with SI.com. So we're good on the email side. Here's my question on Twitter.
Yeah.
My question on Twitter to you is, I've been thinking about this, and I try to respond to promptings where I feel there might be conviction there. I'm not Catholic, so I don't always give up stuff for Lent, but I know the concept of giving up something for Lent.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just wondering if it might be a good idea for me. I want to get your input on this. I can't give up all tweeting because I have to tweet for my SI job, and I have to tweet to promote the podcast. And but I could give up all opinionated Twitter through Lent. I could tweet like story links of of my SI stuff, and I could tweet our podcast.
Yeah.
Our podcast is up, but I could say I'm not going to inject any opinion on Twitter throughout Lent. In order to discipline myself on the Twitter side, should I give up Twitter for Lent? And I'll do whatever you think I should do.
I think no. I think when you. I mean, Lent is. I think it's about sacrificial giving. So I don't know how much of a sacrifice that is. It is. Well, you're. Well,
I would love to like.
If you consider it a sacrifice to give up. Now, selfishly, I would miss that because of how you responded and how much I enjoyed the civil tone and the civil conversations that were created because of how you approached that whole Tony Grossi thing. There was things that I learned about was he fired from the plane dealer? Well, no, he wasn't fired. He took an opportunity from WK, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I was learning about a situation, and you were educating me. And I don't know how much. So is it, if you consider it a sacrificial?
It's more of a sacrifice for me to do it the way you wanted, you and
Okay.
Dan encouraged me to do it. It takes more effort.
Then I would continue to do that.
But should I give myself a 0 tolerance policy? If I screw up, then I have to stop altogether.
That's up to you.
Okay.
I also would encourage people from that, and maybe not giving something up, but adding something to, whether it's another devotion or specific prayer for a specific group or whatever it may be. I think that's another challenge that we can accept is, besides giving something up for Lent, let's add to something of devotion, whatever that devotion may be for Lent, or do an extra, maybe give up a meal.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that there's a lot of rules, as you know, in the Catholic Church, and one of the things is you don't eat meat on Fridays. It's not like obviously your salvation doesn't depend on any of this stuff, because salvation is sealed by grace. We all get that, but it's just an act of reverence.
Yes.
And a willingness to say, okay, in a discipline that, okay, I'm going to fast. Well, fast means in some areas, I'm not going to have meat on Fridays. I've done it in years past where fast on a Friday, for me, I took it to the level of, okay, I'm just going to have coffee, water, and juice for the day on a Friday. So it's whatever you want to do, something to focus on God instead of what you're on food or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, it's an acknowledgement.
Yeah.
It kind of makes you pause from your normal routine.
Yeah.
You can follow the podcast on iTunes, on Google Play, on any podcast platform, Spreaker, SoundCloud, it's on everywhere. We appreciate that. We appreciate reviews, and unfortunately, none of the other platforms other than iTunes allow you to review it, and iTunes is the king, and every fresh review helps us because it gives us an idea of what you're thinking. It leads to show content, and it does help us, theoretically, with sponsors. You can, as some have requested, a Patreon page. So we have a Patreon page, and you can go there if you want to. And here's the thing on Patreon.
Diet Coke Fund.
Here's the thing on Patreon. You're supposed to post like insider content on Patreon. I've had people say like, well, what are you going to put on there for your patrons that you're not putting on your normal podcast? What do we, I don't want to put just the faith stuff on Patreon. I want everybody to hear that. I don't think our Buckeye stuff is so great that'd be dumb to put that on there. What is there to put on there?
There you go down the road of politics.
Well, I wondered about that.
Look at you, boy.
I
that.
Wondered, well, here's the thing. We could do politics from a Christian worldview. We'd have to hold ourselves accountable on the Christian worldview side of it, like I'm hoping to do on the Twitter side. But that's something, maybe people can email us and let us know.
Yeah, give us some ideas.
What kind of ideas do you guys have for what we could put on? It's something that, not everybody would want to hear, but if you want to hear it, you could get it as an insider, for whatever you want to throw in the Diet Coke Fund on Patreon. Spielman and Hooley podcast at gmail.com is the email. You can follow us on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter now. I believe we are at...
Really?
Yeah, we're on Twitter at We Tackle. I think that's it. I wanted it at We Tackle Life, but for some reason Twitter wouldn't give us We Tackle.
I want you to know that you're CEO and you're in charge of that Twitter account.
I'll police it. On the purposeful,
but
you're
speaking for both of us.
I realize. Yes. Thank you for reminding me of that. Thanks. It's a good reminder.
No, I'm serious.
No, I know you are. I meant that. I meant that. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So this is the faith portion of the podcast. If you
I have something really cool today.
Good. Great. Fantastic. The floor is yours.
You have something also?
I like to react to yours. Yeah, I do,
okay.
But I can...
I have two things. I'm going to ask you these questions. So something really cool happened, and This is actually where all you listening out there and you're driving to and from work, something really cool happened to me yesterday morning. Or actually, excuse me, was no, it was yesterday morning because it was after Wednesday's podcast. So it was yesterday morning. I'm up and I'm doing my praying and walking in the morning. And all the listeners in this podcast popped into my brain.
Mm-hmm.
Then I was given a verse on Tuesday night at a men's group, and I went back to that verse. And it was this. It's Ephesians 1:15 through 19. And this is, and you got to understand, so when I'm praying and walking, things pop into my brain, and that's what I pray for. And the listeners of the podcast and the podcast itself popped in my brain. It was really cool when that happens, when you can tie a verse to something that applies directly to your life. 1:15 through 19. For this reason, ever since I've heard about your faith in Lord Jesus and your love for all God's people, I have not stopped giving thanks for you, remembering you in my prayers. That's you, the listeners. It was so cool. I'm sitting there praying for all our listeners. Ones that have a faith, ones that don't have a faith, it doesn't matter. We're all one. I keep asking that the God of our Lord Jesus Christ, the glorious Father, may give you the spirit of wisdom and revelation so that you may know him better. I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened in order that you may know the hope to which he has called you, the riches of his glorious inheritance in his holy people, and his incomparably great power for us who believe that the power is the same as his mighty strength. So the coolest thing about that for me was, so often when I pray for things, I'll pray for the Hooley family, I'll pray for my family or friends of mine.
Mm-hmm.
But to pray for an enormous group, I always felt that was like, yeah, that's probably whatever reason. And I shouldn't put limits on God, but I did. So I'm being honest. But for the listeners of this podcast, when I read that, my mind went in my head right away. The listeners of this podcast popped up.
That's cool.
It's really cool. So
I love what you just said about we're all one. I love that. Even if you're not a believer, we're all one.
Yeah. So it was so cool for me to be able to do that. And what that message says, that I'm praying for your wisdom and whatever you're going through, knowledge and to keep growing or keep searching. Nobody's forcing you to agree or disagree with anything. The only thing that we ask is, and this has kind of been my thing for 2020, at least investigate what we believe, because you have nothing to lose.
And the decision is
everything to gain.
The most momentous decision you'll ever make in your life.
And you know, that's all. You got nothing to lose, everything to gain. And if you're right, there's nothing. You still have nothing to lose.
You're not out anything.
Doesn't cost you a thing.
If you come over to our way and order your life this way and put your faith in Christ, and it turns out that at the end, which it's not going to turn out this way, but if it turns out at the end that it's not true, you're not out anything. But if we're right, and I'm very convinced we are, boy, the consequences of the decision to reject Jesus are, as I said, the most consequential decision you'll ever make in your life. And it is a decision each one of us has to make for ourselves. Mom and dad going to church. I'm sitting next to my wife and she goes, so I'm good. No, you're not. It's a personal relationship, so it's a personal decision. I want
to say again, so I've been saying a lot for the listening listeners. This is the one thing that really popped off the page at me, and I said I felt God really spoke to me. Hey, Chris, you need to say this on the podcast. And it's verse 18. I pray, this is for you listeners. This is me talking to God for you. I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened in order that you may know the hope of which he has called you.
Yeah.
And it was so cool for me to serve our listeners like that. So it was cool.
One of the things I love, if I could just interject, one of the things I love about Paul's letters in the New Testament, and he wrote 14 of them, 14 books of the Bible. I like to go through his letters, whether it's Colossians or Corinthians or Ephesians or whatever, and read almost always, in fact, I would say always, in the first chapter of the book, he will tell who he's writing to. And he wrote these letters to churches in towns. It would be like Spiel's letter to the Canton Church or Bruce's letter to the Urbana Church. These are Paul's letters to churches in towns. And in each one, he tells them what he's praying for. And the prayers, if you go through and find them, they're usually 2-3 verses long, sometimes a little longer. The prayers are awesome. And then you think about how, well, he's writing to believers. So I'm a believer or I'm a seeker. So that's what his prayer is for me. And it's just really powerful stuff. And that prayer from Ephesians that Chris referenced is really a really powerful prayer.
So, can I keep going? Because I have a bunch of other stuff.
Please do.
I hope you're not busy driving or sit in your car for a second and hear this. So, when you have faith, faith requires a response. It really does, to put us in action. This was actually from a priest about 3 weeks ago. He asked this question: do you accept God's love? If you do accept God's love and have a reverence and an understanding and acceptance of that love, that requires action. Do you respond to the whispers of God? So I hold myself to this test. I go, do I respond to the whispers of God? Well, first of all, I put myself in a situation by walking and praying in the morning to be able to respond to God. God responded to me by, when I'm reading that verse and hearing about that verse, the first thing that popped into my mind was this podcast and who we're talking to and who we're reaching in a non-judgmental way, but in a loving way. And this is the challenge to you. And those of you that are maybe a little more mature in your walk, do you respond to that whisper of God? Are you willing to listen, to hear? And when you're willing to listen and to hear, are you willing to respond? So I think I was really challenged. And here's the other question, Bruce. I'm going to ask this to you. I'm going to share my experience with you.
Okay.
When was the last time that you've experienced the supernatural or God working through you, or you did something or accomplished something knowing that was a God-given thing, or you wouldn't have been able to do it without the Holy Spirit or God or faith or whatever? So I got this I had this experience this summer, and I touched on it earlier, and it's really important to me because it's really cool. And I didn't know that it was supernatural until I really thought about it. And people are going to say, you're full of it, and you're speaking hokey dokey magic abracadabra stuff. I talked about when I got the phone call. I just got back from New York, and I got the phone call, and my daughter is in the scariest phone calls. First of all, you think of the way that she's crying and how upset